The Intergalactic Alliance was the heart of peace in the galaxy. Dozens of powerful species gathered there, each proud of their strength, their ancient cultures, and their advanced technologies. On the shining world of Avaris Prime, the Alliance held its great council. Towers of crystal reached into the clouds, glowing with blue light. Strange creatures from every corner of the stars walked its streets. Some floated with wings of light, others crawled on 6 legs with eyes that glowed like fire, and among them, the humans looked so small. Admiral Kale stood with his delegation at the edge of the Grand Hall. His people were the newest members of the Alliance. Earth had only joined 10 years ago. To the other species, humans were little more than children. Their ships were young. Their science was still growing. Their lives were short, compared to the 1,000-year rulers of other races. Whispers followed them. The Earthlings are reckless. They fight without discipline. They are too emotional to be trusted. Kyle heard it all, but he stayed calm. His face was hard, his eyes steady. He knew his people's worth, even if the others did not. Still, it was not easy to stand among giants when everyone saw you as weak. At the center of the council stood High Chancellor Vera, a tall-winged being from the Valorian race. Her voice was smooth, commanding, and filled with confidence. She spread her shining wings as she spoke to the gathered council. "Brothers and sisters of the stars," she declared, "the galaxy is safe. The Alliance grows stronger with each passing cycle. Let us continue to protect our borders and guide the younger races to wisdom." Many nodded. The insect-like Keth clicked their claws in approval. The scaled Ratari hissed softly, their sharp teeth glinting under the lights. The hall was filled with pride and certainty. They believed nothing could challenge them, but Kale saw arrogance. Then, without warning, the great hall trembled. The lights dimmed, and a sharp alarm echoed. Through the chamber, a messenger rushed in, his voice shaking. "Distress call from the Outer Rim," he shouted. "The Zoric swarm has returned." The words cut through the room like a blade. Every species reacted in fear. The Zorics were not like ordinary enemies. They were ancient, older than most civilizations. They were living shadows, predators, from the void. They fed on energy, tearing ships apart and draining their power like vultures. Entire fleets had vanished before their hunger. The council burst into chaos. "They cannot be stopped," cried a Valorian officer. "We must retreat to the core worlds," hissed a Ratari general. "No, strike them with everything we have," shouted a Keth commander. Panic spread like fire. The mighty alliance, with all its power, looked suddenly fragile, and still, no one looked at the humans. Admiral Kale rose from his seat. His uniform was plain, without jewels or glowing armor like the others. His voice was calm, but it carried strength. "We fight," he said. The hall grew quiet. Dozens of alien eyes turned toward him, some filled with disbelief, others with scorn. "What?" sneered a Valorian. "Your crude ships? Your short-lived soldiers?" Kale's jaw tightened. He looked around the chamber, meeting every gaze. "With everything we have," he replied. "If we run, the swarm will follow. If we hide, they will hunt us. But if we stand and fight, we have a chance." The silence was heavy. No one wanted to admit the truth, but Kale had spoken it clearly. The Alliance feared the Zorics. Humanity, new and underestimated, did not. High Chancellor Vera studied him with cold eyes. "Very well," she said at last. "The humans will take the first fleet to meet the enemy. Prove yourselves or perish. Either way, the Alliance will watch." Kale knew what this meant. They were sending him and his people as expendable scouts. If humans won, the Alliance would claim the glory. If they died, no one important would be lost. But Kale did not flinch. He saluted sharply. "We will not fail." That night, as the human fleet prepared to depart, Kale stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Resolute Dawn. His officers, Captain Mira, strong and fierce Lieutenant Joran, young but brilliant, and Engineer Lyra, whose hands never rested, looked to him with trust. They all knew the odds. They all knew the whispers that followed them. "Admiral," Mira said softly, "they think we're walking into death." Kale looked out at the stars, endless and dark. His voice was low but steady. "Then let us show them how humans die," he answered, "and how we live." The fleet's engines roared to life, flames burning bright against the void. Hundreds of ships rose together, carrying the flag of a species no one believed in. Their destination, the Maelstrom Rift, where the Zoric swarm had been sighted. On Avaris Prime, the other races watched them leave. Some pitied them, some mocked them, but none expected what would come next. For though humanity had no ancient weapons, no legendary fleets, they carried something the galaxy had long forgotten: raw courage, stubborn will, and the fire to turn weakness into strength. And as their ships disappeared into the black horizon, the first sparks of destiny began to glow. The human fleet traveled for days through the deep void. Their destination was the Maelstrom Rift, a dangerous sector of space known for storms of plasma and collapsing stars. It was a place few dared to enter, but it was here the Zoric swarm had last been seen. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Admiral Kale stood tall, staring at the star map glowing before him. The blue dots of his ships moved steadily toward the rift. Around him, his officers worked in silence. The weight of the mission pressed on all of them. Lieutenant Joran broke the silence. "Admiral, the crew knows the stories. No fleet has ever returned from facing the Zorics. Some believe we are being sent to die." Kyle's voice was calm. "Then, we show them what humans do when death waits ahead. We do not surrender. We do not run. We adapt. We fight. And we survive." His words lit a spark in the officers' eyes. They had all heard the whispers of weakness, of being expendable. But on this ship, among their own kind, they felt pride. Captain Mira stepped forward, her jaw set. "The crew is scared, but they'll follow you, Admiral. They'll follow you anywhere." Kale nodded. "Then we lead them into the storm." When the fleet neared the Maelstrom Rift, the sight stunned them all. Great clouds of fire drifted, like living mountains, glowing red and gold. Lightning danced across the void, splitting the darkness with blinding light. Broken fragments of old ships floated among the storms, silent graves of fleets that had tried and failed before. "Engineer," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling, "it feels like the galaxy itself is warning us to turn back." But Kale's eyes only grew harder. "No warnings, only paths forward." They entered the rift. Immediately, the storm struck. Plasma waves hammered against shields. Navigation systems flickered. The fleet tightened formation, every ship struggling to stay alive. Then the enemy came. From the heart of the storm, the Zorics emerged. They looked like living shadows, their forms twisting and flowing like liquid darkness. They had no engines, no metal hulls. Their bodies pulsed with glowing red veins, and their movements were silent, predatory. They glided toward the humans, drawn by the burning heat of their engines. The first attack was sudden. A human frigate at the edge of formation screamed as its systems failed. The Zorics swarmed over it, piercing the hull, draining the ship's energy. Within minutes, the frigate was nothing but drifting metal, hollow and cold. Fear spread through the fleet. The crew watched as the shadows circled faster and faster. "Admiral, they're everywhere!" Mira shouted. Kale's voice cut through the panic. "Hold the line! Do not waste firepower! They want us to shoot blindly, to show them our strength. Wait for my command." The humans obeyed. Their hands trembled on the controls, but they trusted Kale. The Zorcs closed in. Dozens of them darted through the storm, their red veins glowing brighter. The humans had seconds before the predators struck again. "Now!" Kyle roared. Every human ship opened fire at once. Cannons thundered. Missiles streaked into the storm, and space filled with blinding flashes of light. The Zorcs shrieked as blasts ripped into their shadows, scattering them. The rift itself seemed to roar as the battle began. For every enemy destroyed, two more appeared. The humans fought with everything they had, turning, weaving, firing in perfect coordination. Kyle gave orders with sharp precision, guiding the fleet like a conductor leading an orchestra of war. But still, the Zorcs pressed harder. A destroyer took a hit, its shields collapsing. Sparks flew across its bridge. Another ship vanished into the storm, swallowed whole. The odds were crushing. Duran's face was pale. "Admiral, we cannot outgun them. They're too many." Kale's eyes burned with determination. "Then we don't outgun them. We outthink them." He turned to Lyra. "Cut all power to non-essential systems, run silent." The order shocked everyone. "Sir?" Mira asked. "They hunt by energy," Kyle said firmly. "If they cannot see us, we become ghosts. Do it." Within moments, the human fleet went dark. Engines cooled, weapons dimmed, and the once bright ships drifted silently among the storms. The Zorcs circled, confused, their red veins pulsing. Faster. They searched, but their prey had vanished. The humans held their breath. No one spoke, no one moved. The ships floated like corpses in the void. Minutes stretched into hours. Tension wrapped around every heart. Finally, the Zorcs began to pull back, slithering into the deeper storm, frustrated and blind. Kale waited, eyes fixed on the shadows. Then he whispered, "Reignite engines! Now!" The fleet roared back to life. Flames bursting from their thrusters. They struck from behind, unleashing every missile and cannon in a sudden storm of fire. The Zorcs were caught off guard, their bodies torn apart in the surprise assault. The void burned with explosions. For the first time, the swarm retreated. Cheers erupted across the human fleet. The crew shouted, cried, and pounded their consoles. They had survived what no one believed possible. But Kyle did not cheer. His eyes were sharp, his face grave. "This was only the beginning," he said softly. "The swarm is testing us. The real storm has yet to come." The crew fell silent, their joy fading into heavy truth. They had won a battle, yes, but the war was only starting. And far away, beyond the rift, the shadows stirred. The Zorcs were learning too. The human fleet drifted in the silence after the battle. Wreckage floated among the storms, broken metal and shattered glass spinning slowly in the void. Fires still burned on damaged hulls. The faces of the crew were pale, their bodies heavy, with exhaustion. They had survived the first clash with the Zorcs, but the cost was written in every scar, every lost signal, every empty chair on the bridge. Admiral Kale stood at the window of the Resolute Dawn. His eyes followed the drifting remains of the fallen frigate, a ship that had carried 200 souls. They were gone now, their sacrifice buried in the silence of the rift. He felt the weight of their loss pressing on his chest. Captain Mira approached him carefully. "Admiral," she said in a low voice, "we lost 30% of our strength. Morale is thin. The crew is afraid of what comes next." Kale's jaw tightened. "So am I," he admitted. Mira blinked at him. She had never heard him confess fear before, but Kale's voice was steady, his eyes burning with fire. "Fear is not weakness," he said. "It is proof we are alive. It is the spark that pushes us to fight harder." Mira nodded, her respect for him deepening. In the lower decks, Engineer Lyra worked endlessly. Her hands were blackened with grease, her eyes ringed with shadows. She moved from console to console, patching torn circuits, forcing broken reactors, back to life. Every ship in the fleet was wounded, but the humans refused to stop. Lieutenant Joran came to her side carrying tools. "You should rest," he said. Lyra shook her head, sweat dripping from her brow. "If I stop, the engines stop. If the engines stop, we all die." Joran looked at her, and for a moment, the weight of their mission fell away. He saw not just an engineer, but a person burning herself alive for everyone else. "You carry too much," he whispered. She gave a tired smile. "That's what it means to be human." Days passed in uneasy silence. The rift stretched endlessly before them. Plasma storms tore at their shields, lightning lit the void with violent beauty, and, in the shadows, the Zorks lingered. They did not strike again, but Kale felt them watching. On the bridge, the tension was unbearable. Every beep of the scanners, every flicker of static made the crew flinch. They knew the swarm would return. The question was when. It was Joran who saw it first. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Admiral! Multiple contacts! Closing fast!" Kale's eyes snapped to the screen. Dozens of red lights filled the radar. The Zorks were returning, this time in greater numbers. "All ships," Kale commanded, "prepare for battle formation." The fleet shifted, wounded ships pulling back while stronger vessels formed the front line. Engines roared, weapons charged, hearts pounded. The Zorks swarmed in like a black tide, their bodies twisting and glowing with red fury. They came faster, sharper, hungrier. The void exploded into chaos. Missiles streaked into the storm. Cannons thundered. Explosions painted the darkness with fire. Ships weaved through lightning, dodging shadowy claws. Humans screamed into their comms, their voices filled with both terror and resolve. A corvette was struck, torn in two. The crew barely had time to cry out before they were gone. The shadows feasted on the broken ship, red veins pulsing brighter. Kale gritted his teeth. "Focus fire! Do not scatter your shots! Target their cores!" The humans fought as one. Every hit was aimed with precision, every maneuver guided by Kale's orders. Slowly, painfully, they began to carve through the swarm. But the Zorks adapted. They split, surrounding the fleet, cutting off their escape. For every enemy destroyed, more appeared. The rift itself seemed alive with red shadows. "Admiral," Mira shouted, "we're boxed in!" Kale's mind raced. He saw the fear in his crew's faces, the shaking hands, the trembling voices, and then he saw something else. Something deeper. Despite the terror, they were still fighting, still holding their ground, still burning with the fire that no shadow could extinguish. He slammed his fist down. "Then we break the box!" Turning to Lyra, he barked, "Can we overload the plasma vents?" Lyra's eyes widened. "Admiral, if we do that, the ship could tear apart!" Kale's voice was steel. "Better to tear apart fighting than be drained alive." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Moments later, the Resolute Dawn shook, violently. Energy built inside its reactors, glowing hotter and hotter. The plasma vents roared with blinding light, spilling fire into the void. "Now!" Kyle shouted. The human fleet followed. One by one, their ships released violent bursts of plasma, flooding the battlefield with searing energy. The Zorks recoiled, shrieking as the storm of human-made fire burned their dark forms. Through the chaos, the humans surged forward, breaking through the swarm. They flew like arrows through the rift, engines blazing. Cheers erupted across the fleet. They had escaped the trap, leaving the swarm burning in their wake. When the battle was over, silence returned. The humans had survived again, but at terrible cost. Half their fleet was gone. Hundreds of lives had been lost. The remaining ships were cracked, scorched, and trembling. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, the crew sat in silence, their faces pale, but their eyes alive. They had stared into death once more and refused to kneel. Kyle stood before them, his voice low but filled with pride. They call us weak, they call us reckless, but we are human, and as long as one of us breathes, we will never be broken. The crew's tired faces lit with a fierce light. They knew the battles ahead would be even harder. The swarm was not defeated, it was only beginning to awaken, but humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. In the darkest storm, the smallest flame can shine the brightest, and in that storm, humanity was fire. The human fleet limped away from the Maelstrom rift. Their ships were cracked and scarred, shields flickering, hulls barely holding together. Inside, crews worked day and night to repair what they could. They had lost half their strength, but they were alive. And in survival, there was pride. On the resolute dawn, Admiral Kale walked the quiet halls. He passed tired engineers sleeping on the floor, doctors running with stretchers, and officers hunched over dim screens. Every person looked exhausted, yet every person kept working. Humanity was bleeding, but still standing. Kale entered the comms chamber. A message from the Alliance Council was waiting. The screen flickered, and High Chancellor Vera's image appeared. Her wings glowed faintly, her face calm but sharp. "Admiral Kale," she said smoothly, "the Alliance has reviewed your reports. You have done better than expected, yet the swarm remains strong. We cannot waste further resources. Withdraw at once and let the senior fleets handle the matter." Kale's jaw tightened. "With respect, Chancellor, the senior fleets have never faced the Orcs and lived. My people know how they fight. If we retreat now, we lose what little advantage we have." Vera's eyes narrowed. "Do not mistake bravery for wisdom. The humans have done their part. Step aside." The call ended before Kale could answer. The screen went black, leaving only silence. On the bridge, Captain Mira slammed her hand on the console. "They're abandoning us. After all we've lost, after all we've proven, they want us to step back like children." Lieutenant Joran shook his head, disbelief on his face. "We've shown them the swarm can bleed. And instead of supporting us, they push us aside? Why?" Kyle stood at the center, silent. He understood more than he wished to. To the Alliance, humanity was useful as bait, expendable pawns sent into the storm. And now, with humans proving their strength, certain races felt threatened. The betrayal was clear. Engineer Lyra spoke quietly, her hands trembling. "Admiral, do we obey?" Kale looked at her, then at his crew and finally at the stars beyond the window. His voice was steady, hard as iron. "We obey only survival, only the fight. The Alliance may doubt us, but the swarm does not wait. We continue." News spread quickly through the fleet. Some were relieved, tired soldiers who wanted nothing more than to go home. Others were angry, burning with rage at being dismissed after so much sacrifice. The arguments filled the halls, whispers turning into shouts. Mira addressed them with fire in her voice. "They call us expendable. They think we will bend our knees. But hear me now. We are not fighting for their approval. We are fighting for the survival of every human soul and for every world that cannot defend itself. If we stop now, the swarm will devour the galaxy and no one will be safe." Her words silenced the crowd. Their fear hardened into resolve. Humanity would stand, even alone. But far away, on Avaris Prime, the council chamber was filled with quiet schemes. Vera stood among her advisors, her golden wings folded behind her. "The humans draw too much attention," hissed a Ratari general. "Their reckless victories make them look stronger than they are." "Agreed," a Keth commander clicked. "If their kind rises too quickly, they will upset the balance of power. Already smaller worlds look to them with respect." Vera raised a hand. "Then we ensure their fall. A message has been sent to the Orcs. Coordinates of the human fleet. The chamber fell silent. None spoke against her. Betrayal had been decided. Back in the rift, the humans pressed forward. They set traps in the storms, used broken asteroids as shields, and turned every weakness into strength. They moved like survivors, like warriors who had nothing to lose. Yet Kale could feel something heavy pressing on his chest, a whisper of danger not from the swarm, but from behind. That night, as he stood alone at the viewport, Mira joined him. "You feel it too," she said. Kale nodded slowly. "The Alliance will not stand with us. I fear they would rather see us destroyed than see us rise." Her fists clenched. "Then let them watch. If they betray us, we'll show them we do not need their permission to win." The next attack came without warning. Scanners lit with dozens, no, hundreds, of Zoric's signatures. Larger than before, their shadows filled the rift like an endless storm. The fleet braced itself, hearts pounding. "They shouldn't know we're here," Joran said, panic in his voice. "How did they find us?" Kale's stomach turned cold. He already knew the answer. "Because someone told them," he said grimly. The crew froze at his words. Betrayal was no longer suspicion. It was fact. The Zoric swarm closed in, faster and fiercer than ever. The void shook with their hunger. The humans prepared for the fight of their lives, surrounded not just by shadows of the enemy, but by the shadows of treachery. Kale stood tall, his voice a blade cutting through fear. "They wanted us broken. They wanted us gone. But they will see. Humans do not vanish quietly into the dark. Ready the fleet. Tonight, we burn brighter than the storm itself." And across the rift, the heavens filled with the fire of engines, as the human fleet charged into the swarm once more. The Zoric swarm fell upon the humans like a black sea. The rift glowed red as their shadowy bodies closed from every side, veins pulsing with hunger. Human ships spun and fired, explosions tearing the darkness, but it was like throwing stones into a storm. On the resolute dawn, alarms screamed. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the bridge shook. Kyle gripped the railing, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold formation! Focus fire on the lead creatures! Make them bleed!" The humans obeyed. Missiles streaked out, cannons roared, and one of the massive Zorics tore apart in flame. But for every shadow that fell, more pressed forward. The swarm was endless. Lieutenant Joran's hands shook on the console. "Admiral, there are too many. We're surrounded. No escape vector left." Kale's jaw tightened. His heart hammered, but his voice stayed calm. "Then we make one." Captain Mira stood at his side, her face pale but burning with defiance. "Admiral, they knew exactly where to find us. This was no accident." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Yes, someone betrayed us." The crew exchanged shocked looks. Rage spread like fire. To fight against shadows was one thing. To be stabbed in the back by supposed allies, that was worse. "They sent us here to die," Mira spat, her voice trembling. "Then let us die fighting," Lyra said from the comm station, her hands still black with oil. "Or better, let us live fighting." Her words struck the crew like lightning, their fear sharpened into determination. The battle raged on. A corvette screamed as its hull split apart, debris scattering through the storm. A destroyer's shields failed, its last signal filled with static before silence swallowed it. Every death was felt across the fleet, heavy as stone. Kale forced himself to stay strong. "Keep moving! Don't let them pin you down!" The resolute Dawn spun sharply, its engines roaring. Plasma blasts tore through the nearest shadows, clearing a path for two smaller ships. They darted through, alive for another moment. But the swarm pressed closer. Dozens of Zorics slammed against the resolute Dawn's shields, draining them. Lights flickered. Systems screamed. Joran shouted, "Admiral, we're at breaking point." Kale's mind raced. He thought of Earth. of the blue oceans and green fields far away, of the millions of lives depending on them. If humanity fell here, the galaxy would forget them as nothing but a failed experiment. That thought ignited a fire in him. "Listen to me," Kale roared, his voice filling every channel of the fleet. "They think we are finished. They think humans break under pressure. But look around you. Do you see broken men and women? No. You see survivors. You see fighters. Tonight, we show the galaxy that humanity does not vanish. We burn brighter than the stars themselves." A cheer rose from the weary crews. Weapons locked, engines blazed. Kyle turned to Lyra. "Can we overload the warp cores of our damaged ships remotely?" Her eyes widened. "Yes, but Admiral, that would destroy them completely." "There's no coming back." Kale's face was stone. "Better we use them than let the swarm feed on them. Do it!" Lyra's hands shook as she typed the commands. Across the battlefield, hulks of broken human ships suddenly flared with light. A heartbeat later, they exploded in massive firestorms, ripping through the Zorix lines. The swarm shrieked as dozens of their bodies tore apart in the blasts. The battlefield became an inferno, shadows burning red. "Now!" Kyle shouted. "All ships push through, engines to maximum." The human fleet surged forward, their ships screaming through the chaos. Explosions lit their path, clearing a narrow escape route. But the swarm was clever. It split, surrounding them again. A massive creature loomed ahead, larger than anything they had faced. Its body was like a mountain of shadow, its red veins glowing brighter than the storm itself. The crew froze in fear. Joran whispered, "What is that?" Kale's voice was steady. "The heart of the swarm." The giant Zorix roared, a sound that shook the void itself, and hurled forward. Smaller shadows followed behind it like soldiers. Mira turned to Kale. "Admiral, we can't face that thing. Head on. It will crush us." Kyle's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't face it head on. We strike its heart." He gathered his officers. "Listen carefully. We'll lure it into the plasma storm. Our ships will draw its attention, while the Resolute Dawn charges its reactors. We'll overload the main cannon with all power reserves. If we hit its core, directly, maybe, just maybe, we can bring it down." The officers exchanged terrified looks. The risk was insane. The overload could tear their own ship apart. But no one argued. "Humanity had no other choice. Let's do it," Mira said firmly. The plan began. The smaller ships darted around the giant Zorix, firing bursts of light, drawing its attention. The shadow beast roared and chased them, its body smashing through asteroids, its glowing veins burning brighter with rage. Meanwhile, the Resolute Dawn dove into the heart of the plasma storm. Lightning crashed against its hull. Systems failed one by one. Inside, Lyra screamed as she forced the reactor past its limits. The entire ship groaned, trembling under the strain. "Reactor at 120%, she shouted. "Any more, and we'll rip ourselves apart." "Hold it together," Kale roared. The giant Zorix turned, sensing the surge of energy. It came for them, its massive jaws opening, shadows twisting around it like a hurricane. "Fire!" Kale commanded. The main cannon unleashed a beam of blinding white light. It tore through the storm, straight into the creature's chest. The shadow beast shrieked, its body splitting apart as the light burned its core. Red veins shattered, exploding, like firecrackers in the void. The giant Zorix collapsed, breaking into fragments of darkness that drifted away into silence. The battlefield froze. The swarm hesitated. For the first time, the predators looked uncertain, and in that moment, the humans roared forward, engines blazing, driving the shadows back. When the battle ended, the fleet floated in silence, battered but alive. They had faced betrayal, endless enemies, and a monster that could have ended them all. Yet still, humanity endured. On the bridge, Mira's voice was soft, filled with awe. "Admiral, we did the impossible again. Kyle stared at the stars, his voice low but powerful. We are human. That is what we do. The crew, though exhausted, smiled with pride. The swarm was not destroyed, but it had been wounded. The galaxy would hear of this. And somewhere on Avaris Prime, those who had betrayed them would realize their plan had failed. Humanity was still alive, burning brighter than ever. The human fleet drifted through the stars, battered yet alive. Their ships carried scars from the rift, burnt metal, broken shields, patched wounds barely holding together. Every corridor echoed with tired footsteps and whispered prayers. They had fought the swarm, faced betrayal, and still they breathed. That alone was victory. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Admiral Kale studied the star map. His officers stood around him, their eyes heavy but shining with determination. Captain Mira broke the silence. Admiral, the crew needs rest. Supplies are low, and many ships can't survive another battle. If the swarm attacks now— Kale raised a hand. His voice was calm, steady. If the swarm attacks now, we fight again. But yes, we will find a safe path, repair, and regroup. We are not finished, the crew nodded. They believed him. After all they had survived, belief was stronger than fear. Far away on Avaris Prime, the Alliance Council gathered. The Great chamber glowed with crystal light. Alien leaders filled the hall, scaled Ratari, insectoid Keth, shining Valorians. Their voices were sharp with tension. The humans live, hissed a Ratari general. After facing the swarm, after being abandoned, they still return with victory. A Keth commander clacked his claws nervously. This is dangerous. Their courage spreads like fire. Smaller worlds speak of them as heroes. They were supposed to fail. High Chancellor Vera sat silent, her wings folded tight. Her golden eyes narrowed. They were meant to be forgotten. Instead, they rise. Murmurs filled the hall. If humans grow too bold, they will claim power. If they inspire others, the balance of the Alliance may shatter. They must be controlled. Vera's voice was cold. Then we must remind them of their place. Humanity cannot be allowed to stand equal to us. Back in the fleet, repairs continued. Engineers worked without sleep, welding broken metal with trembling hands. Doctors moved through crowded med bays, tending to the wounded with whatever tools they had left. Lyra sat on the floor of the engine room, her face streaked with grease and exhaustion. Joran entered quietly, carrying a ration pack. "You've gone 2 days without food," he said, pressing it into her hands. She gave a tired laugh. "Engines don't care if I eat." "But I do," Joran replied firmly. For a moment their war fell away. In the silence of the broken ship, 2 humans shared the simplest act— caring. And in that small spark, humanity's strength shone brightest. But peace was short. "Admiral," a voice shouted from the comm station. "Incoming transmission from the Alliance." Kale stepped forward. The screen flickered, and once again, Chancellor Vera appeared. Her voice was smooth, but Kale could hear the sharp edge beneath it. "Admiral Kale, you are ordered to withdraw at once. The Alliance will take control of the campaign against the Orcs. Humanity has done enough." Kyle's eyes narrowed. "Enough? My people are dying in the rift, while the Alliance hides behind words. We have fought battles you feared to face. And still, you dismiss us?" Vera's smile was thin. "You misunderstand. This is not dismissal. This is protection. Humanity is young, fragile. You are not ready for wars of this scale. Stand down." The call ended before Kale could reply. The bridge was silent. Then Mira spoke, her voice like fire. "Protection? No! They fear us!" Joran's hands clenched. "They don't want us to prove we belong. They want us weak." Lyra looked at Kale, her eyes burning with anger. "What do we do, Admiral?" Kale stood tall, his voice steady as steel. "We do what we've always done. We fight, not for their approval, not for their counsel, for humanity, for every world that cannot stand alone. If they will not stand with us, then we stand without them." Word of humanity's defiance spread. Across distant colonies and forgotten outposts, whispers rose. Small worlds, long ignored by the great powers, heard of humans who stood against, the swarm with nothing but courage and cunning. They spoke of Earth not as weaklings, but as survivors. In the shadows of the galaxy, hope began to stir. The Orcs, too, were not silent. Deep in the rift, their hive pulsed with red light. The smaller swarms returned to the core, carrying knowledge of the humans. For the first time, the predators had been wounded. For the first time, prey had struck back. The great swarms stirred restlessly. Their hunger grew fiercer, and in their whispers, dark, alien whispers, one name spread: humanity. On the Resolute, dawn, Kale gathered his officers. The room was dim, the air heavy with exhaustion. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried power. The Alliance will not save us. They will betray us again. The swarm grows stronger, but we, humans, are stronger still. We have something they do not. We adapt, we endure, we fight with everything, even when there is nothing left. That is our weapon. He looked at each of them. Mira, fierce and unyielding. Joran, young yet brilliant. Lyra, burned but unbroken. When the galaxy remembers this war, they will not remember the races that hid. They will remember humanity, not as weaklings, not as pawns, but as fire. The crew's tired faces lit with pride. In their hearts, fear turned into steel. Far away in the Alliance halls, Vera spoke in whispers to her generals. The humans grow dangerous. If we are not careful, they will rise too high. Next time, we must make certain they do not return. But outside her chamber, voices of smaller delegates rose, speaking with admiration. The humans fought when others fled. The humans bleed, yet they still stand. Perhaps they are what the galaxy truly needs. The seed was planted. The Alliance feared. The swarm hungered. And humanity, scarred and underestimated, burned brighter with each passing day. The fleet drifted at the edge of the rift, its ships dim against the endless dark. Every hull carried scars of war. Humans had no grand armadas, no ancient weapons like the other species of the Alliance. Yet they were still here, still fighting. Admiral Kale stood on the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, watching the stars flicker across the view screen. His eyes were sharp, but behind them lay heavy weight. He knew the truth. The swarm would not wait. It was coming. And worse, he knew the Alliance would not stand with them. Captain Mira entered, her face pale but fierce. Scouts confirm the Orcs are moving again. Not a single cluster, Admiral. The entire hive. The words fell like stones. The room grew cold. The Orc swarm, millions of living ships, an ocean of predators was stirring. Kale's voice was steady. Then the galaxy has no choice. We make our stand here. On Avaris Prime, the Alliance Council debated in their shining chamber. Walls of crystal shimmered with cold light as the leaders of the great species argued. The humans defy us, barked General Thakor of the Ratari, his scaled fist slamming the table. They refuse to withdraw. They challenge our authority. The insectoid Keth leader hissed sharply. They are reckless children, too stubborn to know when to kneel. They will bring ruin on us all. High Chancellor Vera remained silent for a long moment, her golden wings folded close. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. The humans are dangerous. Their courage spreads like infection. Worlds we thought silent now whisper of their defiance. If we allow them to win, the Alliance will lose control. Murmurs filled the chamber. Some agreed, others hesitated. Yet Vera's final words sealed the decision. Then humanity must not survive this war. Back on the resolute Dawn, Joran studied the star map. His hands shook slightly, but his mind was sharp. If the swarm moves at full strength, Admiral, we cannot face them in open space. But if we draw them into the rift itself, into the unstable energy storms, we might, just might, break them. Kale's eyes locked on the young strategist. A trap? Joran nodded. Yes, sir. We bait them into chasing us. Their numbers work against them in the rift. The storms tear at anything too large. If we can endure the chaos, they will suffer far worse. Silence followed. It was a desperate plan, dangerous for all of them. Mira broke the silence. It's madness, but it might work. If anyone can survive a storm like that, it's us. Kale gave a small smile. Madness has kept humanity alive before. The swarm arrived like a black tide. Ships shaped like jagged wings and twisted claws poured from the rift, millions strong. Their voices echoed across comm channels, an alien hiss, a hunger too vast to understand. Contact in 30 seconds, a crew member shouted. Hold formation, Kale commanded. His voice was calm, though his heart pounded like thunder. Not one ship fires until I give the order. The fleet drifted like prey, engines low, shields thin. To the swarm, they looked like easy food. Then Kale spoke one word. Now. Engines flared. Human ships turned as one and dove into the rift. The swarm followed, eager, countless wings filling the dark. Inside the rift, storms raged. Rivers of red lightning cut across space, tearing apart fragments of rock and debris. The void itself bent and screamed. Human ships darted through the chaos, weaving between storms with desperate precision. Behind them, the swarm poured in, vast, endless, unstoppable. But the rift did not care for numbers. A bolt of raw energy split the swarm, tearing hundreds of ships apart. Fragments scattered like ash. Still they pressed on. Still they hunted. On the bridge, Mira gritted her teeth. We won't last much longer. Kale's voice was firm. Stay the course. Hold the line. Every second we endure, the rift takes more of them. And yet, betrayal struck. An alliance fleet appeared at the rift's edge, gleaming ships of Valorian design. Their banners shone with crystal light, but their message was cruel. A transmission filled the human fleet. Chancellor Vera's face appeared, her golden eyes cold. Admiral Kale, by order of the Council, you are declared renegades. Your fleet is condemned. The Alliance will not aid you. Stand down or be destroyed. Gasps filled the bridge. Rage flared in Mira's eyes. They mean to kill us! Kale stared at the screen, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low, steady, unbreakable. Tell them no. The comms officer hesitated. Sir? Kale's eyes blazed. Tell the Alliance. We fight for humanity. We fight for every world too small to stand. And we will never bow. The message was sent. The battle became chaos. Humans fought the swarm in the storms, every maneuver a gamble, every second survival. Ships burned, others vanished into lightning. Yet still they fought. On the bridge, Kale gripped the railing. His voice carried across every ship. Hold, humans! Hold! The galaxy believes us weak. The Alliance leaves us to die. But we are not weak. We are the fire that will burn in the dark. The crew roared back, voices filled with defiance. Even as ships shattered around them, the human fleet surged forward. Outside, the rift storms grew wilder. The swarm, too many to maneuver, tore itself apart in the chaos. Ships collided. Energy storms ripped them open, their endless tide thinning. For the first time, the swarm faltered, and the humans still stood. From her chamber, Vera watched in silence. Her plan had been simple. Let the swarm devour the humans. But now, as her own fleet hesitated at the rift's edge, she saw the truth. Against the impossible, humanity endured. Against betrayal, they rose, and across the galaxy, whispers began again. Not of weakness, not of defeat, but of fire. The rift glowed with rivers of fire. Lightning arced across the void, each strike loud enough to rattle ships from the inside. The human fleet was battered, engines coughing smoke, shields flickering. Yet they were still alive, still standing. Admiral. Kale leaned over the holo map. His uniform was scorched at the sleeve, his face pale from exhaustion, but his voice carried strength. The swarm has lost half its strength to the storms, but it is not enough. They are endless. Captain Mira's hands shook as she steadied herself on the console. Admiral, we cannot outrun them. Not forever. They will keep coming. The silence that followed was heavy. Every officer knew it. Every crew member felt it. Humanity's strength was not enough to hold the tide, not unless they turned the storm itself into their weapon. Joran broke the silence. His young face was shadowed by fear, but his eyes glimmered with desperate thought. Admiral, what if we don't just run through the rift? What if we ignite it? Kale turned slowly. Explain. The rift is unstable. Every storm feeds on the energy of the others. If we push it to the edge, if we detonate our warp cores at the right points, we could start a chain reaction. The storm will collapse inward. It would consume the swarm. Mira's eyes widened. That would consume us too. Joran nodded, his throat tight. Unless we use the gravitic tunnels. The rift has weak points, hidden corridors where the storm flows thinner. If we time it right, we escape while the swarm is caught. The room went silent again. The plan was madness, dangerous, almost impossible, but no one doubted it was there. Only chance. Kale's lips curved into a grim smile. Madness, Joran, but I like it. The order went out across the fleet. Human captains, scarred and weary, listened as Kale's voice filled their comms. This is our moment. The galaxy thinks we are prey. The Alliance calls us rebels. The swarm calls us food. But I call you warriors. And today, we show them the storm belongs to us. A roar answered him. Crews, pilots, engineers, men and women who had lost everything but still fought, raised their voices as one. Even in the face of death, they believed. The plan began. Human ships dove deeper into the rift, weaving between burning storms. They carried their cores to the edge, placing them in precise locations. Each placement shook their hulls. Each second brought the swarm closer. The Orcs shrieked as they followed. Their ships filled the rift, claws and wings scraping through space like a tide of shadows. The swarm was too many, too fast. On the resolute dawn, Mira watched the readings. Sweat dripped down her brow. 2 more detonators left, then we trigger the chain. The swarm closed in. Ships rammed against human cruisers, claws ripping at hulls. Screams filled the comms. Still, the humans fought. Still, they endured. Far away, at the rift's edge, the Alliance fleet watched. Chancellor Vera stood silent on her command deck, her golden wings folded tight. Her officers whispered. They fight like no other. Even in certain death, they do not flee. Vera's jaw tightened. She had wanted humanity to fall, to vanish into the swarm and storms, but now she felt something she had not expected. Fear, not of the swarm, but of humans. Inside the rift, the last detonator was placed. Joran's voice shook over comms. Admiral, the chain is ready. On your word. Kyle looked around his bridge. His crew's faces were pale, eyes tired, but burning with something unbreakable. He closed his eyes for one breath, then opened them, steady as stone. Detonate! The rift screamed. Warp cores ignited in blinding bursts. The unstable storms drank the energy, twisted, and roared louder. A wave of fire spread outward, a storm folding in on itself. Space tore apart as the chain reaction began. The swarm shrieked. Countless ships tried to turn, tried to escape, but the rift pulled them back like a living mouth. One by one, the predators were torn apart, swallowed by the chaos they had chased into. Human ships surged toward the tunnels Joran had mapped. Engines burned red-hot, hulls tearing under the strain. The corridors opened like cracks of light in the dark, narrow and fragile. "Hold together!" Mira shouted, her hands white on the console. The resolute Dawn shook violently as the storm's edge clawed at it. Kale stood tall, voice carrying across the fleet. "You are humanity. Hold the line. Hold the fire." One by one, ships burst through the tunnels. Fire chased them. Storms collapsed behind, but the humans endured. Then, silence. The rift was gone. The storm had devoured itself, closing like a wound. Nothing remained of the swarm but dust scattered across the void. The human fleet floated at the edge, battered, broken, yet alive. Out of dozens of ships, only half remained. But they had survived what no other species could. On the bridge, Mira stared at the view, her eyes filled with tears. We did it. Against all of them. We did it." Joran sank into his chair, his body trembling. "No one will believe it. Not until they see it with their own eyes." Kale stood tall, his voice low, full of iron. "Then let them see. Let the galaxy witness what humanity is." At the rift's edge, the Alliance fleet watched in stunned silence. Their weapons had never fired. Their betrayal had failed. And now their leaders felt the weight of shame. Chancellor Vera's golden eyes narrowed as she stared at the broken but living human fleet. She had hoped they would die. Instead, they had done what even the oldest species had never dared. "Around her," whispers Rose, "the humans. They destroyed the swarm. They survived the rift. They turned death itself into their weapon. And for the first time, the galaxy feared Earth. The humans had been underestimated, betrayed, abandoned. Yet they endured, and, as the shattered Resolute Dawn sailed from the ashes of the rift, one truth burned across every star. Humanity was no prey. Humanity was fire. The wreckage of the rift still glimmered in the distance, a silent scar across the stars. Human ships drifted forward, cracked and scarred, yet alive. Every hull bore the wounds of fire and storm, but inside those ships, hearts beat strong. Humanity had survived what no other species dared to face. Admiral Kale stood at the shattered viewport of the Resolute Dawn. His uniform was torn, his eyes shadowed, but there was a calm fire inside him. He looked at the stars as if they now belonged to his people. Captain Mira stepped beside him, her voice soft, trembling with awe. "Admiral, we were supposed to die in there." Kyle gave a faint smile. "We did die, Mira. The weak version of us, the version the galaxy mocked, that died. What came out of that rift is something new." Across the void, the Alliance fleet held position. Dozens of alien warships stood in silence, their commanders staring at the impossible. They had expected humanity to vanish. They had waited to watch them be swallowed by the storm. Yet here they were. On the bridge of the Alliance, flagship, Chancellor Vera's golden wings quivered as she looked at the human fleet. Her council whispered urgently around her. They should have been destroyed. They are too dangerous to be left alive. They turned the rift itself into a weapon. Vera's jaw tightened. She had never feared a younger species, but now fear twisted her chest. Humans had done what her people, with thousands of years of technology, had never imagined. She knew one truth now. Humanity could not be controlled. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, a message flashed across the comms. It was from the Alliance requesting immediate parley. Mira looked at Kyle, uncertain. After all they did to us, they abandoned us. They left us to die. Kale's eyes stayed on the glowing message. Yes, and now they come because they fear what survived. He turned to Joran, who was monitoring the systems. The young officer's hands shook, but his voice was steady. Sir, our weapons are almost gone. Half our ships can barely fly. If the Alliance attacks us now, we won't survive. Kale nodded slowly. That's why they won't attack. The parley was arranged on neutral ground, a hollow station drifting in orbit above. A dying star. The human fleet limped toward it, every ship a reminder of pain and victory. When Kale stepped onto the council floor, he carried no weapon. He did not need one. Behind him walked Mira and Joran, their faces pale but unbroken. The silence in the chamber was thick, filled with the stares of species that had once mocked humanity. Chancellor Vera rose, her golden robes flowing. Her voice was calm, but edged with unease. Humanity, you have survived the rift. Against all reason, against all odds, you live. Kyle's answer was sharp as steel. We do not live. We endure. We fight. That is what you never understood. The chamber trembled with murmurs. Alien leaders leaned forward, watching the human with new eyes. Vera's wings shifted, her gaze narrowing. You destroyed the swarm. But at what cost? Do you realize what weapon you have unleashed? Do you realize how dangerous you have become to the balance of the galaxy? Kale's eyes hardened. Dangerous? You call us dangerous because we survived what you feared to face. You call us dangerous because we refused to die when you left us to the storm. He stepped forward, his voice rising, echoing in the hall. We had no ancient fleets, no godlike weapons. We only had our will, and that was enough to burn the swarm from existence. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Even Vera seemed shaken. She had expected broken survivors, begging for mercy. Instead, she saw a people who had looked into death and come out stronger. Mira whispered to Joran as they stood behind Kale. Do you see their faces? They don't see prey anymore. They see something else. Joran swallowed hard. They see predators. The Alliance Council tried to recover control. One elder spoke, his voice trembling. Perhaps humanity should be restricted, their fleets monitored, their worlds contained. We cannot allow such unpredictability. Kyle turned his head slowly toward him, eyes cold. You cannot allow it? We did not ask your permission when we entered the rift. We did not ask your permission when we bled and fought. And we will not ask it now. He raised his voice, strong and steady. We are not here to be contained. We are here to remind you. Humanity has earned its place, not as servants, not as prey, as equals, or more. The chamber erupted in whispers, fear rippling like a wave. For the first time, the Alliance felt the shadow of something they could not control. Vera stood, her voice softer now, almost resigned. Then tell me, Admiral, what does humanity want? Kyle looked around the chamber at the galaxy's greatest powers, at those who had doubted, mocked, and betrayed. His voice was quiet but unshakable. We want nothing from you. Not your protection, not your approval. Only this. Remember what you saw today. Remember who walked into the storm and came out alive. Remember who turned fire into survival. because the next time darkness comes, it will not be you who saves this galaxy. It will be us." The words hung in the air like thunder. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one dared. At last, Kale turned and walked away. Mira and Joran followed, their steps steady, their hearts heavy with what they had just declared. Humanity had not just survived. They had claimed something greater. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, the crew watched as stars drifted by. They were bruised, broken, but alive. And in their survival, they had lit a fire that the galaxy could not ignore. Mira whispered softly as she looked out the viewport. "Do you think they'll ever see us the same way again?" Kale stood tall, his eyes fixed on the endless night. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of 1,000 battles. "No, they'll never see us the same way, and they shouldn't." He turned, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Because now, they finally see us as we are." And so it was written in the hearts of all who witnessed it. They had thought humanity weak, fragile, and doomed. But humanity had become the fire that even the stars feared.